Hi, my name's John. I do problems. Everybody loves the Earclacks weapon ball series. The balls bounce around the screen, hit each other with weapons until they die to death. And all the weapons have a special effect. And I decided, what if I made that, but worse? So I went into Scratch, I put together some code, and I made it. Out of the original roster of Earclacks weapon balls, only these ones are in my version of the game, plus a few new ones that I'll talk about later. And so their little old me said, every weapon is done, and I should release the game. But, just to do some balancing, I better run something of a round-robin tournament. So I did that, and I decided to turn it into a YouTube video. Here's how it went. For this tournament, I came up with some very important arbitrary rules, such as I will click right here at the beginning of every round, switching player positions for each weapon. And if it ever goes to tiebreaker, I will click right here, and whoever won the first game will be player one. That being said, let's get into the rankings. Before we start, I would like to discuss how these images I will be showing work. Up here in the top left, we have placement, a picture of the guy, their name. Then here we have some things corresponding to some values, such as win-loss rate, win percent, greatest win, worst loss, and score. The score is a point differential thing, and that's how their placements are determined by overall how many wins or losses you get. Obviously, I probably could have explained that better, but I'm not a professional. Back to the tournament. Sitting in last place is Unarmed, who has a win-loss rate of 1 in 14. Their greatest and only win is over Shuriken, and their worst loss is to Pike. They finished with a score of negative 18 on the point differential system, and they won a total of 12 games over their 15 matches. Unarmed is a growing damage character, much like Boots, whose initial damage is based on where you click, and also speed at the same time. They suffer mainly from incredibly poor range because I didn't bother coding the ball as the actual hitbox, rather a somewhat invisible hitbox behind it. And it's meant to have higher damage than Boots, but will never reach that point because they can't hit anyone. It's just their damage is also really inconsistent because of the way the damage scaling works. Really unfortunate. You hate to see it. One of the best in the original, one of the worst here. Next up, in 15th, we have Staff, who has a 312 win rate. Their greatest win is over Boots, and their worst loss is to Soft Machine, with a score of negative 17 and a total of 9 games won in their 15 matches. Staff is a growing damage projectile character whose fireballs get larger the more balls they hit, and they explode when they hit the wall. Sounds good on paper, not so good in practice, because they basically lose every single tiebreaker, and since the fireball itself doesn't have a hitbox until it explodes, a bit of an oversight on my part, it is very rare for the fireball to actually hit them, even if the staff is following where the opponent is, which you would think that would make it easier to hit, but it really doesn't. Kind of unfortunate that they did this bad because they're my personal favorite, but, sucks to suck, I guess. Next up, in 14th, tied with somebody else, is Shuriken, who has a 312 win rate. Their greatest win is against Spear, who's much higher up, and their worst loss is to Unarmed, who is the worst one in this entire goddamn tournament. They ended with a score of negative 16 with 6 total games won. Yeah, so Shuriken is a set damage projectile character whose shurikens bounce more the more times they hit or whatever. Sometimes they do this thing called like Hyper Shuriken, where they hit the opponent like a billion times and like a billion shurikens come out and does a lot of damage, but it didn't really happen that much in the round robin proper. Honestly, they started out really promising, got worse over time. And they also caused something with have like the only DQ in the tournament with Bow because they kept on spawning too many goddamn projectiles. So also one of the highest crash rates. Yeah. The second member of the tie is Pike, who is probably named incorrectly and is the first original character added. They have a win-loss rate of 4-11. Their greatest win is against Soft Machine, and worst loss is to Dagger. They won a total of 10 games, and has a score of -16. Pike is a set damage character who's using the original gimmick of the Dagger, where it'll stay still when it gets a hit, and it'll stay still for longer the more hits they get, and the concept is that they'll bounce into the weapon. Problem, they have little to no damage to back that up with, even if they have a larger hitbox. Honestly expected them to do just a little bit worse. They struggle mostly from low damage, not having a particularly useful gimmick. That's really it. If they had higher damage, then maybe they would have gone further, but, that's just speculation. Next, in 12th, another 3-12 win rate, is Soft Machine, who is inspired by the JoJo stand of the same name. Their greatest win is over Shuriken, and their worst loss is to Pike. They had a score of -14 and won a total of 11 games. Soft Machine is a set damage character whose gimmick is to flatten opponents, which moves them further down, lowering their bounce. Usually, Soft Machine was able to get the opponent to the bottom of the screen successfully. Unfortunately for Soft Machine, they couldn't really do much after that because characters with higher damage just killed them, and projectile characters usually have a system where they point to the opponent. The only exception being Bow, who notably lost to Soft Machine. It just kind of sucks for them. They have mediocre damage, not fantastic range, and a gimmick that sometimes comes back around to bite them. Sorry, Soft Machine. Now, in 11th, we have Dagger, who has a 5-10 win record. Their greatest win is over Pike, and their worst loss is to Scythe. They won a total of 14 games and finished with a score of -11. Dagger is a set damage character who spins faster when they land hits, and I'm pretty sure they have some of the highest set damage of any of the set damage characters. Them having high damage is nice. It's actually slightly nerfed from a previous version. But, they really suffer from the lack of parrying because that's their, whole thing in the original. And without it here, they just kind of sort of suffer for it. But the high damage is nice. The high damage is nice, but it feels like it has, low synergy with its own ability. The range is mediocre. Yeah. Here is Scythe in 10th place with a 6-9 win-loss rate. Their greatest win is against Flask, and worst loss is to Shuriken, finishing with a score of -5 after a total game win of 15. Scythe is somewhere between a set damage character and a growing damage character, because when they get a hit, that means their poison lasts for longer, and also, their poison also does more damage or lasts longer. I'm not really sure how the code works myself, but they are able to hit the opponent with the scythe to do 1 damage, so, the problem is that they didn't really have any, fantastic damage options, but a lot of the time they could just outlast the opponent, which was nice. Here we have Boots, who also finished with a 6-9 win record. Greatest win was against Flask, worst loss was to Staff, and they finished the score with -1 with a total of 19 games won. Boots, much like Unarmed, who's directly based on them, is a growing damage character whose damage is based on speed. A thing with Boots is that their attacks are technically weaker than Unarmed, but they just land a lot more of them, so their damage scaling matters more. And also, the boots only ever face left or right. It's not rotating, so that kind of worked out poorly for them. If somebody got under them, it was basically just over. They did pretty good. Honestly, expected them to do a lot better, but, Next up, the first member in a three-way tie for 8th, 7th, and 6th, we have Hammer, who is the first one who has a positive win rate with 8-7. Their greatest win is over Boots, and their worst loss is to Fishing Rod and Warp. They won a total of 20 games and finished with a score of 5. Hammer is a growing damage character who also gets more spin as they hit the opponent, similarly to Dagger, but less. Yeah, don't have much to say about them. They just kind of stole Dagger's gimmick and did it slightly better. Next, in the tie for 7th, 8th, 7th, and 6th is Warp, who's the first character with the 10-5 win rate. Their greatest win is over Fishing Rod, and their worst loss is to Bow. They finished with a score of 5 and won 20 games total. Warp is a growing damage character who teleports a few seconds after they land a hit. They did pretty good due to the nature of high damage due to the growing damage effect. And also, the teleport gives them really good mobility, so they're pretty hard to hit. Some cons, they have poor range, and their ability teleported them out of bounds a lot, so that was just kind of, unfortunate in terms of, winning the game, because it would just reset. Warp did actually screw over a couple of contestants like Dagger, but, Here, we have Fishing Rod, who's the next member of the tie. 10-5 win rate, greatest win over Bow, worst losses to Warp. Had a score of 5, and finished with 21 total games won. Fishing Rod is a growing damage character who has the ability to pull themselves closer to the opponent a few seconds after they land a hit. They have a similar ability to Warp, which also gives them, great mobility, but with, higher range, and they used to have, really high growing damage, which I may have forgotten to mention that they're a growing damage character, but was nerfed just before the round robin, so they probably would have done a lot better otherwise. I don't really have much to say. Here, down in 5th place, we have Bow, who has also a 10-5 win rate. Their greatest win is over Spear, and their worst loss is to Fishing Rod. They won a total of 22 games and finished with a score of 9. Bow is a set damage projectile character who shoots more arrows the more hits they land. They actually have pretty good set damage in terms of set damage characters. In fact, I think they have the highest tied with Dagger. I suck at coding, so basically when they hit the opponent with the bow, they place it down and it just shoots arrows like a turret in a straight line. And it's like a trap character, because if you run into the arrows, you're going to take a bunch of damage. So it's all about the angles and stuff. And this worked out great for them in a lot of situations. And yeah, they did better than I expected, really. Good job, Bow. Now we have Spear here in 4th place with an 11-4 win rate. Their greatest win is over Scepter, and their worst loss is to Shuriken. They won a total of 23 games and had a score of 11. Spear is a growing damage character who gets more range the more hits they land. They're also the first character I coded. Honestly, they have some of the most embarrassing losses in the tournament, notably losing to Shuriken. But they still did really good, finishing in 4th. They beat somebody higher than them as their greatest win, so that's already a good start. And for something that I really didn't have to change, they surprisingly didn't get power crept at all. First on the podium, we have Flask, who had also an 11-4 win rate. Greatest win is over Spear, worst losses to Scythe. They won a total of 23 games and had a score of 12. Flask is a growing damage trap character that will drop a puddle of acid every time it lands a hit. And as I said multiple times, due to a coding error, when it drops a puddle of acid and then lands a hit while that one is shrinking, it'll make the original one much larger, so it can snowball very easily, which, great for them. Worked out really great. Good job, Flask. We have the silver medalist, Scepter, with a 14-1 win rate. Their greatest win is over Sword, and their only loss is to Spear. They finished with a total of 29 games won and a score of 23. Scepter is a growing damage character who just heals when they do damage. This scales extremely well because they can heal a lot at a time because they don't, turn around and spin the other way before landing another hit, because it just goes straight through them and heals like 1 billion health. Yeah. It just scaled really well for the format. Finally, in first place, we have Sword, who also finished with a 14-1 win rate. Greatest win is over Flask, and their one and only loss is to Scepter. They won a total of 29 games also and finished with a score of 26. Sword is just plain and simple the simplest character in the whole tournament. They're a growing damage character, and that's it. They have the highest growing damage of any character, and it scales extremely well for the same reason as Scepter, being the hits go really fast, and they can just shred opponents. They have pretty good range. They get a lot of damage fast, and they're just a lot more consistent. Most of their victories were just stomps, and they only had one loss into the second place here, and that was still a 2-1. So, good job, Sword. You're the best. So if you stuck around to the end, thanks for watching. This video is really fun to produce, and I haven't made something like this before, so maybe I'll do more coding videos in the future. I have some other stuff planned. Thanks for watching. Bye.